And here we are, live again, episode 44, Recruiting EQ. This is the season finale, you guys. It's last one of the year. I think the rest of the year, most people don't want to be having lunch doing this. They're probably going to be getting tipsy at their office Christmas party or visiting their aunts and uncles or something. So this is the last one of the year. Thanks for joining us. It's a drop-in for those of you who are watching this on Facebook, YouTube, or LinkedIn. So people will be dropping in hopefully the whole time. I know some other people who are coming. But thank you very much, guys, for being here now. Just a quick disclaimer before we go around the room. If you are watching this on another platform, we are not on those platforms. We're on a separate thing here called StreamYard. We will see your comments, though. So there's been great participation. Please comment, send us your questions, your thoughts. Did you love 2024? I don't know that that's a popular opinion. Did you though, or did you, or what did you not like about it? What are you thinking about 2025? Questions, comments, please throw them in there. We will read them during a lull in the conversation. We won't name you because of confidentiality reasons, because this is being recorded, and maybe you're supposed to be working right now. So there you go. Okay, let's get to it. Shall we go around the room, introduce yourselves, you guys, and a little bit about what you do, please?
Sounds good. I'll tell you what, Rick, I'll go first. My name is Rick Cristiano. I'm the Director of Recruiting Sales at Empower Professionals. We're an international talent acquisition agency with a couple of different product lines that we service, everything from financial services and banking through architecture and design. We have a presence in North America, the Asias, and are currently working on building on our presence in other locations as well. That's a high-level view of myself, but go on to the next one.
Awesome. Thanks, Rick. Thanks for joining us, David. Evan, do you want to hit it next? Introduce yourself and give us a bit about what you do.
Sure thing. Yeah. So Evan Ogle, I'm a Senior Vice President at 10th Revolution Group. We are also a IT staffing company, global as well. My focus is really customer engagement, account management, BDE. I run some of our larger accounts from a client perspective. Used to be a recruiter back in the day, but still obviously quite involved in that space.
Awesome. Thanks, Evan. David, thank you for joining us. You want to please introduce yourself and a bit about what you do to the crowd.
Hey, Rick. Nice sweater, first of all. That's a good one.
Thank you. Look at this. Look, check it out. I wore it last time. It's Halloween 2. Talk about ugly Christmas sweater.
Oh.
The thing that really got me is it's not Halloween 1, it's Halloween 2. It's so specific that it got me. Please go on.
And there was I thinking it was a Christmas sweater or a festive sweater. It looks like that's in the top half and creepy in the bottom half. Okay. All right. So I'm a leadership onboarding coach. So I work with companies when they have incoming leaders, when they've mergers, acquisitions, etc. And I work with the incoming leader and the hiring manager over a period usually of about 3 months to support the incoming leader build their platform for what I would classify as elite performance. So I've been doing that for 4 or 5 years. I have a proprietary program that I created that's run about 200 times now, I guess. And I've been speaking with Rick and Julie and the gang there for about 6 months now, so I'm becoming familiar with you all.
Yeah, thanks, David. And I love the repeat business. It's amazing. Graydon, thanks for joining us as well. You're just in time.
Hi, guys. Sorry about that.
To introduce yourself to the team, to the group.
Hi, guys. I'm Graydon Wellborn. I am co-founder of White Ash Group. We're a recruitment, staffing, and executive search firm that focuses specifically and solely on the legal cannabis space. I started the company 6 years ago. We're pretty boutique still. There's about 7 of us, and we work across Canada, the US, and now we're in Europe and Australia. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Thanks, Graydon. Repping the cannabis market, which of course is legal in Canada for anybody else who's super scandalized right now.
Yeah.
And if we can all just getting some interference on my end. So if we can all mute ourselves when we are off, just in case, and I will do the same just because it's not very advanced software. So there you go. Thanks everybody for being here. Other people will drop in, I'm sure, at some point. I'm looking around the room, thinking of Julie right away, who unfortunately is not making it today. I didn't only invite dudes. Okay, you guys are the ones who showed up, but it's not a thing. I did not exclude women who are leaders in their field, of which there are many amazing ones if you watch these other episodes. Okay, just one small disclaimer. It wasn't supposed to be just a boys club, but this is who showed up. This is my loyal ride or dies, I guess. So I'd like to throw out a couple of questions. We didn't really get past the first question last time, but we were also riddled with technical difficulties, or I was anyway. So the two discussion points I threw out there, let's start with the second one first, maybe this time. It seems like a lot of the year people have been talking about tech, right? Tech stack, tech solutions, what's working, what's pissing people off. Pardon my language. It's my show. You can swear. Anyone can swear. So what's working, what isn't in terms of like tools and solutions. AI tools, obviously, very big topic of conversation. And then on the flip side, and partially as a result of the tools, I feel like back half of the year, there's been a lot of discussion about what are the profiles that people are now going to be looking to hire. I have seen things switch a lot more toward a personality hire, less than billings and speeds and feeds. And people are less interested in, I need an exact match of the person who is selling or recruiting in the exact same vertical and give me their numbers. That's what it was since 2022, exclusively on my end, right? And now it's a little bit more like we want someone who has good resilience. We want someone who is extremely social, who can go out face to face a lot. So it's a lot more around the human being. Don't know if it's related to the changes in tech, but I'd love to maybe ask you guys what you're seeing in terms of like what your clients are hiring. Has there been a change? What do you see? How do you see that changing in the following year?
Well, you don't mind, Ray, I'll tell you what, I'll go first here and respond to that. I think that's comprehensive in nature, at least what I've seen from my end. What do I mean by that? Different clients have different needs. And so you're right that on one end of the spectrum, we've seen this traditional model of, do they operate in our space? What are their numbers? And I think what has happened with the recruiting being the way it has the last year and a half is a lot of people have fallen off, changed, went in different directions. And so with that said, companies don't necessarily need people who want to be or are in that exact space already. It's how can they weather the storm, right? Can they weather the up and downs, or what we call the recruiting roller coaster? And so I agree with you fully on that one. I don't know if technology, I just don't know because I'm unaware if that is one of the underlying or common denominators of what's going on in people in their search. I do know that there's tech that works. I myself like tech, but not too much tech because I don't like to get lost in too many software programs. Like, you can't see the forest for the trees when you have so many resources around you. You don't know where you're devoting your time. But the people who can focus in on one or two tech platforms that work well for them, and as you said, be resilient, kind of weather those storms, I think that's where we'll see the next round of people coming in. I don't know that the old, we need somebody with Salesforce experience is as relative nowadays with all kinds of other types of CRMs and ATSs that have popped up and are going to be created in the next couple of years as well. So just to give it an overview of my thought process on this, tech is important. It will shape the way of the future, how we do recruiting and business development. AI is definitely the number one name right there in the industry. Everything's about AI. I think personally, too much tech becomes too much. Like, let's give people some tools that work well for the company and their infrastructure, or tools that they've previously used and are comfortable with. And then those people who can adapt, they'll be the ones who will weather the storm. And what we see is definite over the last couple of years, the ups and downs of recruiting. So that's my 2 cents, and that's my perspective on it.
Thanks, Rick. Thanks, Rick C. Anybody else want to weigh in on this? Have a burning desire? Shall we go in order? Evan, you were second to the party. You want to weigh in on hiring profiles?
I think one big thing, at least I've seen in my space, is the last few years have been so weird with companies and their in-office policies versus remote policies, and trying to weather that storm, and kind of the whole ebbs and flows of what the market has seen in that space. I think this year was a big year. I hope I'm using this correctly, but a correction, essentially, because 21 and 22 was just, it was crazy. and everyone was hiring everyone. There was no rhyme or reason to it. They were being paid way too much money, being allowed to work fully remotely. I think that, this last year has really been companies trying to correct themselves and get back to a new normal. But to your point, Rick, and the whole culture fit, most of my customers are starting to go to either 3-day or 4-day, some even 5-day in-office model that they're already implementing and going to be fully implementing in the new year. So I think with the fact they're trying to build a new, I want to say new, but a reoccurring office culture, that personality fit is probably going to be more important because they're really trying to start something fresh again. Whereas opposed to if you're working fully remotely, we really don't give a crap what you're doing, just as long as you hit your numbers or as long as you're doing your job correctly. So I agree with you. I'm seeing a lot more of that also, which is finding it's a little bit tougher, I think, to recruit in that space because it's much harder to recruit for personalities as for actual skill set. But at least that's what I'm seeing. I think that's a huge, huge play now going to 2025 and across the entire market. Pretty much not just technology, but everything that we recruit in.
Do you also feel the same thing as Rick, though, is that going only by the numbers, yes, it can be easier and safer on paper, but that there's been turnover there anyway, and people have gotten poached, they haven't worked out anyway, and whatever else. And so this is possibly why they're willing to, like, have you seen the same kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's almost, I almost don't want to say this because I am on the agency side, but if it's just going by numbers, it's not as imperative to pay fees for an agency, right? The internal talent acquisition can usually do that themselves. I think the niche part of most agencies in the spaces they operate in is qualifying individuals that are not just, what you actually have on a resume, really identifying the culture fit, their background, what they're looking for, how they're going to mesh with the internal team. That's, in my opinion, the biggest reason why you're going to pay a fee for an agency. So hoping that at least this change that we're seeing will actually be more conducive to the agency spend and wanting to actually hire specialists to, find resources for you. So we shall see, but that's the glass half full mentality I'm taking about it.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's possibly a big delay, by the way, you guys. So it's possible that I'm saying this and it hits you like way later. So and for others as well. So we might be talking over each other a little, but don't fret it too much. David, do you want to weigh in on this as you were next in here?
Yes, for sure. And I want to preface this by the fact that I'm not a recruiter and I'm not with an agency, but I see it from, therefore, kind of one step removed. I have written a playbook for a fairly decent size recruitment firm, and some of my experience on that shows me that, Rick, you mentioned about I think you said Salesforce, but just thinking CRMs or social media platforms, there seems to be very much a place for that form of technology at the front end of the search. Then there seems to be the in-between bit. There's the proprietary software, which might then be a Salesforce or whatever it is that we're using for our data analysis and data capture. So I, from the technology side, I see the front-end search part being influenced quite heavily by technology. Now, from my perspective in onboarding leaders, and working with companies as they prepare for their incoming leaders, what I notice is, and when I'm hired, particularly through recruitment firms, is that, and I focus mostly on leadership, and actually I only do executives, but leadership and executives in general, is that the personality portion plays a key role. And I think this, Evan, you were just mentioning there that the making sure that the person is the right fit, cultural fit, the experience, the values, etc. And I don't think that is something that technology is well suited for yet. So what I see is potentially a split of services. So again, Evan, you mentioned, what would I pay for if I'm outsourcing my recruitment process? I'm going to pay for that knowledge and experience in working with an individual to make sure that we are then interviewing the right people and that the hire is the right person. That's separate to an industry of collating data. And so perhaps at the lower end of the, I say lower end with due respect, the lower end of the recruitment industry, where it's almost clickbait, it's speed, and it's, just not get me a warm body, but I need somebody this week. I can see that part of the industry very much being dominated by technology. But the leadership executive search side is very much a value service. Yes, there's search involved, but at the end of the day, as a company, I only actually want to see 3 or 4 people, and I want to know that they're going to be very well vetted and have a very good idea about my business before I interview them. And I guess that last bit I'm saying, based on my executive experience as a president of a company, when I used executive search firms, I did so to save me a whole lot of time and energy. And if I could do it by technology, I would have done it myself. So I think that's I split it 2 markets, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. Have you noticed the change, David, while we're talking on that front, the onboarding front, the executive front? Did you also notice a change from 23 or midway into 24 that people are now looking for different personality traits or different attributes out of a potential match, or not really?
One big thing that we've already mentioned here, and that is the hybrid process that's occurred, and so the onboarding process now is in almost all circumstances is online. I'm doing all of mine online, but then I always have, although I did launch my business just before COVID. So it just so happened that everybody was at home then anyway. But what we're finding now, and in fact, I spoke to a pretty large company yesterday that's looking to expand into Europe and America, though all of those leaders they hire are going to be virtual. And so the onboarding process and the skill sets required for these incoming leaders is to be able to integrate into their companies in a virtual format. And I'm here in Ottawa. Even if you're hiring locally, those people mostly are virtual. Whether you're a leader in the organization going into the office, or you're somebody reporting into that leader, but you're either on virtual yourself or hybrid, or you're working with virtual and hybrid people. And there's a different skill set required there. So I've seen some of that. So that's relevant to the conversation here. I'm sure there's other things as well, but I'll pipe up when I hear them.
All right, thanks, David. Graydon, how do you feel about all this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I think I echo a lot what everyone's mentioned before. I do think that for us at least, in the first few years, because I deal in a unique market, the first few years that we had the business, it was basically just like, get me someone that can do the job. Do they have the ability to do the job? And now as companies are maturing and the market is maturing, this last year, we closed so many more deals based on soft skills and culture fit. And that actually put a further emphasis on me and my account managers to develop like deeper relationships with the companies, rather than being like going from an order taker to a true extension of the company. I had a couple clients where I actually like spent, a full week sitting in office with them and just absorbing their company culture, so that I could quickly determine when I was interviewing people whether they'd be a fit or not. And that takes a lot of time, but I do think it's worth it. And to Evan's point, like, as an agency, you don't want to be like, oh, there's no reason to use us. But, if you are just an order taker, like, and you have a pretty good talent acquisition specialist, then sure. But really finding that unique talent takes like the extra time, the extra squeeze. So it's been really good for us. And I think my focus next year is to have more relationships like that, where I'm not just seen as a vendor, but rather a true partner, or someone that's like embedded into the business. And then in terms of technology, the only thing that I've really, Rick, do you mean from like an internal perspective, like what we're using?
I mean, that is what I meant, but externally too. Like I just
Yeah.
meant like tech stack that you use, right? Like, is everybody still using LinkedIn Recruiter? Is everybody switching?
Yeah.
To something else?
We added something, and none of you are my competitors, so I'm happy to tell you this. But we added something that I think was really great. Is I'm sure some of you use this, but it's adding some sort of AI onto your video chat function so that when you are speaking with candidates, you can actually be present, much like how we are right now, and you're not feverishly typing while they're talking. It creates like a whole better conversation. What I do is I get something that'll spit out the transcript. I take the transcript, I put it into ChatGPT, and then I begin to have a conversation with ChatGPT about the interview and pulling information and asking it questions based on the transcript. Now, of course, this doesn't take away from the fact that you have to pay attention during the interview and have to know what to ask and know what you're doing, but it's a way better note taker than I've ever been in my entire life. So that's something that we've used that has been a nice game changer for us. I've just found that my recruiters' notes are just better because of that. They're still doing the work, and I'm totally fine with them to leverage those tools. I think realistically, like our clients are using those tools, we should be using those tools. I don't want to fall behind on all that stuff, so that's super important to us. And then just conversely, also, I have clients that are now asking candidates in their interview if they use AI, if they leverage it themselves. So and then they ask them how they use it, because they're trying to see if they're going to hire someone that is keeping up with the times and looking for possible efficiencies within their scope of work. So I've noticed that on several interviews and have placed a lot of people that are like pro AI. So, and I know that's Rick, you said that was or Rick C, you said that was the topic of the year. And I think it's going to continue to be something we speak about.
Thanks, Wayne. Dominic, thanks for joining us. Sorry,
Lee, I was on another call. What topic are we on right
now? It's the same topics as last time, Dominic. It's just we didn't really get past topic A because the AI thing sort of consumed our souls, I think, and ate us for breakfast, as it should. But the other thing was to talk about, have we seen a change? Because I personally have seen a change in what clients are asking me to provide in terms of a potential good fit. It was all numbers before. It was all billings and numbers. We touched on this a little bit last time. Now I feel like people are not as interested in that. Obviously, it's always important, right? But they're not like, I don't need someone who, is in the exact same vertical as me. I don't need to know their numbers can be decent, but what they need is, do they have resilience? Are they creative on the phone? Are they able to influence people? So it's a lot of the soft skills have become crazy important. It's a huge shift from the past 2 years that I'm seeing. And so I've just thrown it out there if you're seeing the same thing internally and also with your clients.
Absolutely. Like you were mentioning, grading AI, going back to that, we've been using AI note takers, but most of the roles that I place are very niche: SaaS, supply chain tech, supply chain logistics. So I'm already dealing with salespeople. Most of the stuff we want to know is their numbers, but even that is digging into their sales DNA. What really makes them tick, what drives them, what gets them going, right? Because it's great you were President's Club 3 years in a row, but like my hockey coach used to say, what have you done for me today? Right? Like it doesn't matter what you did in the past, but AI, I mean, there's so many things that I'm using with it, whether it's Clay, scraping data. I mean, I just made a sheet this morning of all the different AI tools we're using, just so far advanced. When I go to show somebody, they're like, how do you do that? Mind you, one of these was a software tech company. And I'm like, you guys don't even know how to use this part yet? It's coming fast. And I think upskilling the soft skills are huge, because it's not sales anymore. It's just data driven, right? So it's consultative selling. It's understanding your customers' pain points inside and out. Here's our solution. So like when you start to see data scientists now jumping into enterprise sales roles, it's not let me take you out and get you drunk, or it's not that anymore. It has totally changed from what I've seen. From what I heard internally, for my team and recruiters, I look for a lot of things. Like my best recruiter I found at the hockey rink, he was there for 9 years. I just saw him hustling back and forth, and I said, "Hey, you want to come work here?" He was there 9 years, and he's the best recruiter by far.
My best recruiter, Dominic, was a mason, a stonemason.
There you
Never
go.
recruited in his life. And I was like, you're dealing with clients, all this madness, dealing with, swampers that don't show up and things like that. It's just,
Swampers that don't show up.
Yeah.
Those
just,
swampers, they'll get
just the same kind of material, just as, looking at the DNA, as you mentioned. I like that.
Yeah. Oh,
it does feel like there's a bit of a line in the sand too between companies that are doubling down, tripling down on the relationship sales approach. Like asking companies what their sales approach is real. It's a can of worms these days because I feel like people are flailing a little bit. They're trying different things, and often, and David, you talked about this a lot. Often they haven't even really thought it through ideologically what their sales process is, or like their ideology is behind it, as opposed to like good or bad. We need someone who is good at sales. Isn't enough information at all to know if they're going to match the approach and culture. Because to your point, Dominic, sometimes it is someone who's really driven by data. If their sales pitch is all about value prop and features and benefits and being able to understand the granular elements of the problem they're solving, that's one approach. If it's relationship driven and it isn't about that, and it's like, let the tech people talk about tech stuff later, but let's get down to business, you and I, over drinks or whatever, that's a whole different job. It's not the same job as the other job. They may have the same title, but it's not even all the same job.
Exactly. No, and there's still, like, for a lot of logistics 3PL companies that we work with, they want those people that have relationships with the automotive suppliers, right? The supply chain managers at those companies, because they're getting those shipments and, the expedited freight and all that. So if they had those relationships already and then they move companies, if that company can support what they're currently doing, absolutely they'll come over and follow them because it's that relationship, right? But a lot of companies that I work with, especially in the brokerage space and logistics and all that, they think just because somebody's got a $60,000 gross profit book that's all going to transfer. Well, it depends on if they can handle what they bring over, right? Not to mention you got to wait for legal to go through it and the agreements. So some of these companies want that's where you just got to let them know up front. It's like, listen, I understand what you want, but this is realistically what it's going to look like, and it's going to take time. And for example, one of the candidates that we had Campbell's as one of his clients, and it wasn't that the company couldn't handle it, but it's just by the time legal gets their hands on it, goes through it, make sure that company can handle all the freight that they're doing, that takes time, 6 months or so, right? And usually they want to give them 3 months ramp up. So, yeah, I'm seeing a lot of changes in the sales space, especially right now.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I would add that because of technology and all the stuff that's sort of we're talking about here, there's becoming a clear divide between who's actually good at sales and who's good at building out campaigns and blasting messages and emails. To me, that's not sales. That's like a whole different thing that is supports sales, but it's not really sales. And then there's the SaaS has made this thing where there's AEs that exist in companies that they're not hunting anything. They just get booked a meeting and then they just read a script to a prospect. To me, those aren't people that know how to crush sales. To me, sales is the end-to-end experience, building the relationship, maintaining the relationship. Can you go back to that watering hole and get something else from it down the road? It's not this like transactional thing that has happened with SaaS where someone's setting up a meeting for me and I don't even have to worry about how that meeting was set up. I have a few notes on it and then I just talk to the customer, yes or no, move on. That's this sort of new age of sales. And I think like we're going to see is that the true salespeople are going to become more and more valuable, who are able to retain relationships and actually close meaningful deals. And like you said, Dominic, like potentially bring a customer over to a new company, even though if it might take time, but those are the real salespeople. And so I think, especially in my industry, in the cannabis industry, it's like very much based on reputation. Have you dealt with the government boards? Do you have retail connections, things like that? But yeah, I think that sales is changing, and we do some tech hiring, and it's like you can quickly figure out who's just someone that's good at sending a lot of messages via AI campaign.
Yeah. Like for the roles that we work on, like, enterprise SaaS roles in the supply chain space, these are net new logo hunters, right? The SDRs and BDRs will do discovery. The big dogs will come in and close the deal, right? But they also have solutions consultants with them, right? Especially for tech companies, pre-sales guys, and the biggest focus right now is customer success, huge focus. So I think like that account manager, you're going to see a combine with AI now. You're going to see some of these roles combined because I can potentially do the job of 5-10 people right now. Like I know I can, right? So what's going to happen once all these companies figure it out? And another thing I've been telling people, and watch out for this down the road, is the 18-year-old kids that are coming out of high school, they're not looking to go to college. They're looking to, all right, can I pay Rick for his knowledge and information? And then I want to go and start my own thing. So we're going to see a lot of contractors, consultants. Because, setting up a clay table and scraping the data and doing email campaigns, that could be delegated off, right? Here you go. Here's your salesperson. That is going to be very valuable. But I can close the deal, hold those relationships. Just like you said, great. I'm already seeing it. So
I have to agree with what Dom and Graydon are both saying, that I think we all probably come from that traditional model of relationship building, right? Especially whenever it comes to North America staffing and recruiting, and especially when it comes to our type of clients, what I see are, whether SAP or their manufacturers, there's usually this culture fit or their reputation, as I believe Dom had said previously. But one thing I also have to take into account whenever I say this, and not to sound like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, is some of our clients could be very relative to the other Rick C on the call, where he reaches out to staffing and recruiting companies. And I know from my own experience working at a couple different agencies that some North American-based recruiting companies want people who have that North America mentality, relationship building. I've also come from the offshore and nearshore model as well, where some companies, they might be looking for that inhumane element, that very mechanical, robotic element of somebody. Can we put somebody at a desk? Can they send email campaigns, and how well can they send email campaigns, and then push it off to an account manager or an account executive or somebody who will manage that relationship? And so, if we're going to talk about technology and geographic areas, the technology has allowed us, at least in some of my previous positions and current position, where we offshore some of our own labor to, the Asian market, India, Philippines, China, where we do look for people who aren't necessarily the best communicators per se, but, can they follow a process? How well will they follow the process? Do they want to elaborate on the process themselves? With called the steak and the sizzle. I have a steak. I can give that to somebody. It's a very mechanical process that doesn't require a lot of artificial thinking. Take that for what you will. But, if I'm Rick Coluccio and I'm going after a staffing agency, and their sales team might be both locally and distributed in other countries, we might lose that element, that human element. And I've seen that currently. I've seen that previously. I see that both models do work, and some models work better than others. So I guess it goes against my original training that I received whenever I was younger, first getting into the recruiting sales, that, you do all your own outreach, you do your own recruiting, you do your own sales, you manage all those relationships, because in the end, who knows more about your clients than yourself? Who knows more about your candidates than yourself? But technology has come about. The recessions that we've seen, the hardships in the markets have created this need for outsourced labor. People all want cheaper labor nowadays. Where do they go? South America, Asia, you name it. If there's cheaper labor there, they're going to go there. And so what do we find whenever we offshore our labor? Well, people aren't as relative to the North American culture. They might work for these North American companies, but they don't live in North America. They don't speak the same language necessarily as high or fluent level. And so it might sound counterproductive to the way the conversation on this call has gone, but, I've seen it, and I've seen them both work. And so we do have to take into consideration that, companies, whether they're staffing recruiting that want to offshore recruiters, or they're bigger companies that want to offshore sales teams or, administrative teams, where do we find that balance, or where do we give up that salesmanship to just put somebody in a seat so they can do something that would take a normal account executive hours a day of prospecting? Let's put that time and energy to good use by having somebody in North America manage the relationship, while that prospecting part, that finding clients, finding names, putting them on spreadsheets, we can hire 10 people. We can hire 10 people in another country to do that for the price that we could pay one person in the USA. So that was long-winded, but I think that just comes from what I've seen my second half of my career of working both locally and internationally with, sales teams and sales support teams that support me.
I mean, that's an interesting point to bring up, right? Like, here we are talking about AI, but yet it's true. A lot of people aren't necessarily going the AI route to do sourcing, whatever. There is a lot of companies who are starting to outsource overseas and offshore, or create a nearshore office to do sourcing and prospecting and all the sort of like preliminary elements, and then book meetings in with someone who is, onshore, for lack of a better term, right? Who can maybe go do a face-to-face meeting and whatever else. Are you guys seeing a lot of this too? Is this something that you think is going to be more of a trend, maybe as the next trend in staffing and recruiting before AI takes over all of our lives and drives us everywhere and does our taxes? It already does.
I don't think, at least in my industry, I can't talk for, it seems everyone else has sort of got a different niche here, but at least in the cannabis industry, that just wouldn't fly. It's such a personal industry that there's been a few companies I've heard of that we're up against that have, done the offshore thing. And it's just like, it doesn't work. The industry's too small, and it's too, people have a lot of like heart and passion for this industry, and they just don't tolerate anyone who's not like being authentic, being real. So it takes that extra sort of like elbow grease and stuff, and the building of relationships. So at least for us, I'm never going to do that. I'd like to, because I'm sure it would make my life a lot easier in some respects. But I think long-term, I'm also like kind of like the face of my business. So because of that, I just can't have like any risk in terms of like quality of communication and like work. But I can see how, Rick, to your point, like it would make a lot of sense in some industries where it's about like the speed and velocity that things can happen.
What about, so there's a few things that are really complicated, right? That in the job market right now. And David, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this too, because you're dealing at that executive level. But I mean, there's a whole bunch of factors of change right now, right? AI, offshoring, right? That might change the face of who hires what, who's located where, and who does what piece. General technology advancements and tools that purportedly will do any piece of your job. If you carve your job up into 1,000, there's 5 apps that do each and every one of those 1,000 pieces of your job in this really granular way, and some that link all those 1,000 together. It's crazy. But then you also have workforce changing. There's predicted to be so many people, a large portion of the workforce is going to be retiring in the next few years. They said we're hitting retirement age. These are largely people who are CEOs, VPs, et cetera, who will be retiring. And there's not really, from what I'm hearing, an amazing succession plan to be able to fill those roles. There's so many mergers and acquisitions. There's so many people who are selling off pieces or a majority of their share to PE firms. Like, that's been out of control in 2024. You know what I mean? So, and then there's this sort of dwindling interest in the traditional job market that we have from Gen Z, right? So young people aren't really coming up in the same kind of numbers. They're opting to do gigs, part-time work, travel, whatever, to much more advanced age. They don't really see a benefit, right, in getting in larger numbers. Where is that leaving you guys? Like, how are you feeling about all these different, not challenges exactly, but there's a lot of different factors of change happening. Does it feel as chaotic? Do we think this is coming to a head next year, or is this all just noise and it's like, whatever, man, it's all going to truck along, we'll be fine? What are you guys hearing out there from people? Are these problems that are coming up, or is it not really being talked about?
I'll share a thought again from the corporate side rather than the recruitment of leaders side. When I go through the process with the incoming leaders and the hiring managers, what is really very evident, and it has been pretty much my whole career, and I've probably got at least 2 decades on most of you here, is that companies typically don't do succession planning. They don't do strategies. All the things that you think a company should do, in most cases, they don't do it, or they like to think they're doing it, but they're not really doing it. I actually believe, and I agree with what you said there, Rick, you got 2 Rick C's here. So Rick Host. I actually agree that with the people like me coming into retirement, there will be a dearth of leadership out there, and there's not enough succession planning going on. There is some, but not much. It presents a great opportunity to the industry, to the executive search industry, that there will be a whole ton of new leadership required. And this isn't going to be a next year thing. This is going to be kind of over the next 5 or 10 years. It will be a very slow moving train, as it were, but it's absolutely an opportunity. And when something that Graydon said earlier, extending the relationship, I think becomes even more important to know your client, your customers, insofar as what is their longer term strategy, even though they haven't got it written down and they don't actually know how to articulate it to their staff in most cases. But what if you can get to understand their strategy? And I'll put in a plug for what I do here. I work with companies for about 3 or 4 months after the incoming leader has been placed, and I learn all sorts of stuff about the company that a recruitment firm doesn't have the opportunity to learn. And what I find is things like I've just said about strategy not being there, succession planning is rarely there, but you also find that there's 1 or 2 people that shouldn't be there either. And so there needs to be movement. And we're bringing in people who they're not usually new to leadership, but they're obviously new to this company, and they have to have a broad understanding of the whole spectre of the organization. And partly that's because of the point that we're talking about here, Rick, which is the lack of succession planning. And so much more is recruitment from outside versus promotion from within when it comes to the senior levels. In fact, I'm thinking of all the CEOs that I've onboarded in the last 2 years. I think they've all been external hires. There's been 1 or 2 that have been in the role for a few months and then they brought me in to assist. But nearly all of them are external hires. So that talks to succession planning, it talks to opportunities for the executive search going forward, and it speaks to being able to extend the relationship with the company and actually find other opportunities, once you're in that company.
For sure. And it's a complicated problem because it's widespread, right? So it's like, what are we going to do? And on that similar note, actually, I want to read out this comment. Hector, I'll say his name because he was here last week, and I thought he was going to join this week, but I guess he can't. But he wrote, I love the shift in convo for this week. Yes, we beat the AI horse to death last week, and we did, and we will continue to do so for sure. Can you all give your opinions on the importance of sales enablement and how to bridge the gaps between Gen X and Gen Z? I'm going with Gen Z, by the way. I'm Canadian, so not Gen Z, but Gen Z. That's my little Canadian mic drop there. On fusing old school sales techniques, as in driving numbers, knocking on doors, sales hunters using tech, social media, etc., in a world where no one is answering phones and anymore, to automating and creating workflows to. I got cut off there. But I think we understand the idea, right? Is that there's one cross section of people out there who don't want to answer a call and who think that cold calling is a negative, that if you do that kind of thing, right, it's perceived as, oh no, I don't want to have anything to do with you, or spamming. Then there's another section where it's like you have to cold call and so on. Some of it's generational. I don't know. How do you guys feel about those different perceptions out there of the different sales techniques? Is it generational? How do we bridge the gap between it all?
I don't think it's generational. I just think everybody has their own preference on how they like to communicate. And I found that out in my early career when I was doing technical recruiting. I used to have to connect with CTOs and directors of software. And I think the perception is that people who are engineers or directors of software are introverted and like to sit at their computers. And I found that to be quite the opposite. There's definitely the mix of personalities. Everybody's their own person, have their own life experiences, and depending on where somebody comes from, their social backgrounds, that very much varies from age gap to geographic location. So I don't think it's a generational thing. I don't think you can really put one specific quantitative or qualitative factor on it, because some people are naturally social, some people aren't. And that goes from, people who are nearing retirement to people early on in their career. So that's just my perception on it. How do you sell to that? Well, when I first interviewed for one of my first job ever, they just told me, mirror the person on the other side of the desk. And I think that's what I've done well. I try to open up and be warm and break the ice, and then people who are receptive to that will naturally interact with you based on that warmth and that willingness to start the conversation before you go into business. But then you get other people who are very short in their responses, as we all know, and you just take your P's and Q's. Okay, if this person's being very short in their responsive, they're not very warm, you could tell they want to get down to business, then I'll immediately pivot. I'll say it out loud. Hey, listen, for the sake of saving time, I got another call that I got to jump on after this one, so I'm going to get right to it now. Are you okay with that? Yes, I am. Get right down to business. And so really it's just about mirroring the person on the other side of the desk. That was advice given to me earlier on in my career, and I found that to be the best way to manage those sales interactions. And if we're going to talk about sales enablement, to pivot from there, kind of parlay off of that, I come from you make your sales calls, right? You try to jump on video calls in the digital age now, that building of your brand, connecting with people. I don't know if you can really put a quantitative factor on that as much as that's a qualitative thing. Prove me wrong, tell me I'm wrong. I'm open to hearing about it. But that goes to what I was saying previously about working for agencies that in companies or having clients that do offshore their talent. We utilize software such as merge campaigning software. I like to keep it simple with using the Microsoft Office products, because basically everybody has it. Everybody's familiar with Microsoft Office products. And so you don't have to teach a new email system to somebody new. I don't think it's the biggest deal, but there's email campaign softwares, and then we talk about transcribing softwares. I like what you guys are saying. I wish I would use them a little bit more often myself, to be honest with you. It sounds great. It sounds like something I should look into. If we're going to talk about information gathering softwares, a lot of companies say that we use AI to get people's contact information. I think that's great, because I came from the old school age of where you try to connect with people on LinkedIn. You either made phone calls, or if you were going to send an email because you were out of connections for the week, or for whatever reason you didn't have an upgraded LinkedIn subscription, you had to type in 4 or 5 different versions of their email address into a blank carbon copy and hope that one of those went through. And, the one that doesn't come back is bounced back is the one you put on your list in your Excel spreadsheet to follow up in the future. And so I love the idea of these AI or whatever technologies they actually use to gather people's data, so you can put that data, that email address, that phone number on a spreadsheet. And then we use modern day technologies to create these email and automation campaigns. So, I use the Microsoft Office products pretty heavily just for that reason alone. And then, I'm sure we're all familiar with the big names such as like Zoom Info. If it's not Zoom Info, a more affordable version would be something such as Contact Out or Rocket Reach. I love those because the putting 4 email addresses into a blank carbon copy is very monotonous, and it's hard to keep people doing that on a day-to-day basis. And when all your competitors have that instant access to people's email addresses, you really have to provide your own team members with that same instant access so they can go about doing other more important things with their day, instead of typing in 4 different versions of someone's email address and doing that 4 or 5 times per company over the course of 20 companies of the day. So I don't know if that elaborated or answered your question, Rick, but I mean, that's kind of what I've seen and where I'm at right now with my experience.
No, for sure. Anybody else want to weigh in on that? The different maybe generational gap that you see out there,
I can hop in.
communication-wise?
So from my perspective, my business partner is 10 years older than me, and talking about the generational thing, like he is just like a cold call machine, and I'm just not. It's just, you know, I'm in my 30s, he's in his 40s, and it's just not really, it's not a thing I'm against, but it's not my, you know, as Rick was saying before, like it's where your comfort is and what you're, you know, used to. My perspective also is that it's do whatever is going to have the impact and whatever is going to get people's attention. I'm finding more and more when we do make cold calls, people on the other side are, if you contact the right person, they're excited because they're like, you know what, no one phones me anymore. So it's kind of like an automatic standout because other recruitment firms are not phoning anyone. So in terms of like, they're phoning candidates. Everyone's always phoning candidates. But in terms of the clients and the outreach and the BD, it's like, how do you cut through and be different than all the noise? It's like, yeah, it might be a simple phone call that's really short and just ends up, you know, being a follow-up email that leads to a Zoom chat or something like this, right? So I think that the way I've always coached my team is like, what's your strong suit? Let's push you towards there and like develop that. You know, if you're really great at drafting emails and doing online content, then fantastic. But if you're like great on the phones, then let's have you hitting the phones. I know that's not quite scalable, and some of you might have bigger companies than mine, but that's sort of where we're at currently, and that's how I see it.
Makes sense. We've only got a few minutes left, and I don't want to leave it only on work. This is our last episode of the year. It's been a great year of trying this out. This is for only half the year really that we had video calls. So we're approaching the holidays. I figured nobody's going to be on these things watching them for the next 2 weeks anyway, right? So we'll take back up in January. Before we leave, round the room, best Christmas movie, holiday movie, in your opinion? Favorites, not best. Best is so divisive. We're going to be arguing for years. We'll have to go to Reddit and read for
Die
years.
Hard.
But
Bad
I was going to
Santa.
say Die Hard. Yeah,
Bad Santa.
Die Hard. Die Hard is a Christmas movie. Let's just call it what it is. It is.
Bad
So
Santa.
that's a vote for Die Hard.
Whoever just said Bad Santa, that's a great one.
Bad Santa, yeah. Die Hard, Bad Santa. Where are you guys on the Gremlins front? The first Gremlins to me is a Christmas movie. I don't give a shit what it is.
Classic.
Big fan
Classic.
of Gremlins.
To me, Lord of the
Definitely
Rings is a
Christmas.
Christmas movie. I watch that every
Get
Christmas.
out of here. Is it just because of the tradition, or how
It's
is it a
just
Christmas movie?
tradition. My actual answer
Okay.
will be either Elf or Jingle All the Way, the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie.
Yeah, Elf is a big one.
I'd give a second to the Elf. I like Elf. Each year, my daughter and I, we watch 5 movies leading up to Christmas. And at Christmas Eve, we always watch A Christmas Carol. So the 1950s version, which for me is just is the classic Christmas one. But that's because I'm British and I'm old.
Is that the 50s one? Is that Alistair Sim or is that George C.
Yes,
Scott?
it is.
Which one
Yes,
that?
Alistair Sim. Yeah, I think that's Christmas for me in a nutshell, or a chestnut.
I like that.
Yeah. Anybody?
Let's not forget about Home Alone and A Christmas Story, though.
Home
Let's not
Alone
forget
is
about Home
good.
Alone and A Christmas
Yeah,
Story.
Christmas
We watch
Story,
those with the
Home Alone.
kids.
Scrooge.
Okay, I'll give a
We
special
got
shout out
Hector
to
here
the
chiming in.
Grinch, the Jim Carrey Grinch.
Yeah, for sure, and the original one too. The Grinch is classic.
Yeah,
classic.
Yeah.
Okay, what about since we're talking about traditions, then what about favorite Christmas tradition, holiday tradition, not Christmas, but holiday tradition? You guys have anything in particular
Not
aside from watching
recruiting.
these movies?
Not recruiting.
The tradition of not recruiting. Love it. Any foods? You guys have favorite foods you do for Christmas? So, the turkey, I guess, or what do you guys do around the holidays?
Huge Italian family, so it's
I think for us,
pasta, everything. You name it, it's there. You're walking home with a couple containers.
I want to come to Christmas at your place, Dominic. That sounds
Yeah.
good.
Well, we're right in Michigan.
yeah, I think
I'll come down.
Unlike
everybody get in a
Thanksgiving, where
bus.
you kind of have to follow, for tradition wise, you have to follow a very specific menu. I'd say Christmas, for at least us, is whatever the heck we want. Our favorite foods is usually the Christmas Eve dinner, whether it's fish or steak or whatever it might be. I think it's kind of the freedom. We always kind of bring our own stuff and just say, this is whatever the heck you want. Let's do it, and just eat enough food until you literally can't see straight anymore. That sounds great to me.
That's great, yeah. But Thanksgiving, you can't venture. I like this. That's strict. You got to stick with the turkey, cranberry sauce, the whole shebang, right?
Yeah.
Within certain parameters.
Within certain parameters. Dominic, for me too, Italian family. We used to do manicotti at Christmas. We used to do lasagna at Thanksgiving. It was like a whole, you know what I mean? A whole rollout.
Yeah, my family's so big now, we have to go to a hall to do it. I mean, I have 32 cousins, and I'm 38, right? I have 3 kids, and everyone has 3 or 4 kids. What's that?
Do they have good Italian halls in Michigan where you are?
Oh yeah, tons.
Do they have good Italian halls in Michigan where you are?
Yeah, it's all Italians where I live, East Side.
Amazing.
Good to know.
It's all Italians.
You got
like
the
Shelby Township, Rochester, Macomb, entire area is Italian. But my mom is from Hamilton.
Hamilton, Canada?
The Hammer.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I like that.
The Hammer. Canada represent.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all. This has been lovely. Anybody have anything burning they'd like to add before we cap off the year?
I just want to make sure that I'm correct in my thinking, Dominic. That is Stevie Y behind you, isn't it? His shirt.
Correct.
Of course, he came from Ottawa, Nepean, and there's a rink named after him where all my kids played hockey. And so I wasn't sure until you said Michigan earlier, and then I thought, okay, well, there you go. That's the conclusive evidence.
He played for the Peterborough Petes too.
Yeah.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah.
My next door neighbour owned the Peterborough Petes for a short while. He was the goalkeeper at Tugnut, Ron Tugnut. So his kids, he used to be. He moved on about 10 years ago. But Ron, he had 2 kids, neither of whom made the Peterborough Petes, so he bought them. And then
of course he did. Welcome to the hockey world.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Ron Tugnut, you nepotist. Amazing.
You know how many parents I know pay for their kids?
Yeah. Crazy. Yeah. Ending on a hockey note. Any big hockey predictions? Who's winning the Stanley Cup this year, you guys? We're gonna get in a huge argument.
It's the outdoor rink. Unfortunately, I get roped into it, but there you go.
Unfortunately, it doesn't look like it'll be my New York Rangers, who are playing horribly.
Yeah, they were killing it last year. I mean, that was a marquee season for the Rangers last year.
It's not a marquee season unless you win the Cup, and that hasn't been since '94.
Snap. Yeah. Exactly. Touche. Yeah. Well, then what are we supposed to say about the Toronto Maple Leafs? They haven't won since 1967.
Just don't talk about them.
I'm a Montreal Canadiens fan, okay? I'm from Montreal.
I
say 94.
I'm spoiled.
I feel bad for the Maple Leafs fans. I really do.
Stanley Cups in my lifetime with Lemieux and now with Crosby, so I'm pretty fortunate when it comes to that. Yeah, I'm pretty.
That's what I was going to say. We know why Rick's.
And Ron Tugnut even played for the Pens back in the day. Believe it or not, I saw a game with him playing. Listen, guys, I got a phone call at 1. I got to jump off. Rick, thanks so much for inviting me. You guys, it's all good to see you again and or meet you. Merry Christmas, happy holidays. Good luck with everything for the rest of the year, right?
Take care.
See you guys. Thanks, Rick.
Thanks, Rick.
Bye-bye. See you guys.
We had 1 vote for the San Jose Sharks, too. I don't think the Sharks are going to win this thing. Thanks, y'all. Have a great rest of the night.